leave your phones on your desk, don't talk to each other, just go and look out the window for 10 minutes. And when you come back, we'll talk about what happened. And some of them come back and were like, oh my God, that was amazing. I've never done that before. And suddenly things became clearer.
Hey there, my friend. Yo, yo, yo. I've been wanting to say that all day. I don't know why. I'm sure it's been a long time since you've heard someone say that. And hopefully it's a long time to go before you hear me say that. But just want to have some fun today. All right. You are listening to the Hot Mess Hotline. This is Stephanie Crevens. You are totally in the right place if you are an ambitious leader who wants to pull off a big, stupendous, amazing transformational project for your organization. We teach you how to lead with strategy, innovation, flexibility, and focus for new business results, digital transformation, tough decisions, and my God, all the other problems that come up in our business life and with our teams. Whatever you're working on, we've got hard-earned lessons from other executives to make you more adaptable and put into practice when this episode is over. All right, today's guest is my new friend, Jimmy Burroughes. He kind of lives in my dream city. He lives in Cabo San Lucas, y'all. Like, how amazing is that? I was hoping that we could do the episode where he lives, but logistically it just didn't make sense. But one day we will meet up in person. So my friend Jimmy, he has an amazing story to tell. He's a leadership expert on a mission to change the way we achieve results. Specifically, he focuses on burnout because he burned out. Like he went down in a ball of flames, and he's going to tell us that story. And he has come back stronger than ever and now works with 7 to 12-figure businesses all over the world to take the best practices that he's learned from his research on how to beat burnout and help these companies take their teams and the way they work together and the way the individuals work to the next level with 5 simple variables. He has such a great story to share, just gave me goosebumps, and I knew that you had to hear it because I think we can all admit that at certain points in our careers, we've been burnt out. And hopefully you found your way back, but you've probably got a colleague who is there now, and so we need to support our colleagues in getting away from burnout. So let's hear Jimmy's story, and then on the back end, let's connect again. We'll talk about what we've learned. All right, let's go. Jimmy, tell me about your hot mess.
Wow. If we rewind the clock back to the start of my career, which is a long time ago, I went through the British Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which is essentially officer training. And one of the things that they teach you in the Royal Military Academy is that excellent is a B grade. Ooh. And so when you have been educated and brought up in that sort of context where excellent is average, or just above average, you become high performance focus. And if we fast forward then about 15, 16 years through my career, one of the things I noticed was that there had been a consistent pattern of performance anxiety, needing to be excellent or needing to be better than excellent. And, you can wrap around some imposter syndrome around that. You can wrap around performance anxiety. You can wrap around a high stress lifestyle. But in 2017, things kind of came to a head. And I was at that point, I'd gone through a relatively busy HR career, but I'd ended up as an operational GM running an 8-figure P&L in a large organization over in New Zealand. Had a team of about 40 people. I was traveling 10 days out of 14, living out of hotels, changing city every night. But I would also wake up at 3 a.m. to do the board papers or to get things ready for the CEO.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up with 3 different executive leaders in 18 months. And you know what happens when you have a new leader on the executive team? You've kind of got to prove yourself and you've got to get the measure of each other again and again. So this was just stimulation for Jimmy to drive himself even harder, just to be a sucker for punishment. Decided to finish an MBA that year as well. So I was working
all
of the hours that God sent. And something had to give. And, I woke up one morning and I remember this was kind of a steady decline, but I woke up one morning and I thought, I just don't know if I've got it in me to go to work today. I don't know if I can. And so I sat in bed thinking I had a hangover because I was obviously drinking lots of red wine and lots of rum to calm down from the stress of the day the night before. So I was sitting there with this headache thinking, I don't know if I want to go to work today. I don't know if I can. And I just started running through all the things that I was feeling. I was like, well, I seem to spend all of my day just playing whack-a-mole. I'm not making any significant difference anymore because we're just everything we try isn't making a difference. There's no purpose to what we're doing. The executive team are in disarray. The board executive team are at loggerheads with each other. We've got a performance culture that's expecting results in an almost impossible scenario. So there's a high expectation of delivery with very little reality of it actually happening. I was constantly under threat because of all of the challenges to the organization, constantly under threat of restructures, budget cuts, no bonuses this year, no pay rises this year, people being made redundant. So you're always kind of on the back foot of, I have to keep delivering because I don't want to be the one who gets cut. And unfortunately, many of the people that I worked with had also been cut. But then there was this like, Jimmy, you need to go and innovate, come up with something magical because they've just changed the law and half of your bottom line has just disappeared. You need to find a way of fixing that. But don't do anything too risky because we can't do risky things because we're doing risky things everywhere else. And you're the cash cow for the business. So you need to come up with something without risk.
Okay. So you were hearing the message of innovate, but don't be risky. Like, did they know the laws of physics? Like that doesn't even work.
There's a little bit of a tension there, right? So you can see why all this was manifesting itself into this crazy situation. And then at the same time, my now former wife and I were spending time over in the UK. And so obviously, because it's a 12-hour time difference from New Zealand, I would just work through the night and then be available in the day because I could never take time off. I could never let things go. And I always had to be at the center of everything. And so I sat there in bed on this day in 2017, and we could call it the start of a nervous breakdown, but more realistically, it was the start of burnout. So I went in and I handed in my resignation that day, and I knew I still had 3 months to go to hold on by the fingernails whilst I worked through this notice period. And then unfortunately, in that time, my life just unraveled. My marriage ended, my MBA finished, my job finished, I moved out the house, and the wheels came off. And so realistically, it was a bit of a hot mess.
That is the definition of hot mess, sir.
I like to do all the things, you know.
Yes. I mean, I say that with love, but man, you just crammed it all together, didn't you?
Yeah, I like to live life at pace, the good and the bad.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, so many big shifts in 3 months. Could you just identify maybe the range of emotions that happened in just those 3 months during the unraveling?
Yeah, I think before you get to burnout, there tends to be anger, frustration, helplessness, a feeling of like, no matter how hard I try, I don't seem to be able to fix this. I'm just whacking moles as they pop their heads up. I'm in constant fight or flight. I'm constantly troubleshooting. Why can't all the people around me just get it and support me with the level of energy and commitment and passion that I'm putting in? So there's that sort of frustration piece. But when you get to burnout, and obviously I've spent the last 6 years fully immersed in the world of burnout consulting, when you get into burnout, generally you're past caring. You have apathy. You have mental treacle. It's like wading. Your cognitive process is like wading through golden syrup. So you can't make decisions. You can't think clearly. You struggle to get out of bed in the morning.
Yes.
You're such low energy that actually almost like it's like talking to a zombie. And this is one of the things that comes up when you talk to leaders about if your team is burning out or if you're burning out yourself, that probably your energy reserves are really, really low. Or if you're trying to work with somebody who is burned out, there's no point in trying to have a rational conversation with them about how do you think you might fix this and how do I coach you through it? Because they just can't think.
Can't problem solve. Yes. Yeah.
You're just zombified. And obviously, what we do as an organization is to try and stop you getting to that point and keep you working and talk you off the ledge. But the reality of the emotions that you feel when you're in that is almost a lack of emotion.
Yes.
You're just almost like in the gray and just existing. It's not a fun place to be.
Yes. And tell me if I'm capturing this correctly, but what I heard from your story and the stories that I hear from others around true burnout is the self-coping mechanisms are also designed to numb you further, to keep the apathy going, because anything else is just really, really painful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We've obviously spent the last 6 years researching deeply, but if I go into
Sure.
one of the pieces of research, which is probably the one that, well, it is the one that comes last in the book, but it's downtime. And the coping mechanism for most organizations around downtime is, oh, take 2 weeks vacation and recharge your batteries and come back. And the analogy I use is, if your business is standing outside in a thunderstorm and you come in and dry off for 2 weeks on vacation, and then you go back out into the thunderstorm, surprise, surprise, you're going to get wet again. And
Yes.
so the 2 weeks vacation does not work. So when it comes to the recovery mechanisms, oftentimes we end up falling into a couple of different areas. Number one, hobbies, sports, families, relationships, and likes and passions tend to fall by the wayside. So because we're overcommitting to work, or because we're so tired, it's taking us longer to achieve those things.
Yes.
So we're working longer hours to keep up, as opposed to doing less or slowing down or thinking about the right things to do. We just hamster on wheels, spinning faster and faster and faster, and tired and tired. So often when we meet people who are burning out, they're working late into the night, they're working weekends. And it's not necessarily because that's the thing they need to do, but it's because they feel like that's what they have to do. And so they make those choices. The second one.
And real quick, Jimmy. Yeah, because we want to hear from your experience. Like, were you doing all those things? You were feeling that pain. You were feeling that apathy. Yes. Yeah. And so
my choice was, wake up at 3 a.m. to do my board papers, be in my first meeting at 7 o'clock, work through meetings without a break until 7 o'clock in the evening, and then start my job, which was being a GM. So running the department, doing the budgets, all that other stuff. But in between those meetings, generally I would walk out of a meeting and 2 or 3 of my team would be sat there waiting for me with a board paper to read, or a document that needed signing, or some lunch to walk to the next meeting whilst eating lunch. It was just relentless, because there's just so many things going on. But because I was so immersed in it, I couldn't say, I'm not going to that meeting, because you just hamster on the wheel.
Yes, hamster on the wheel. And there's an element of burnout when you're approaching martyrdom, and it's like, they can't do this without me. If I don't control it, if I don't make the decisions, if I don't attend that meeting, the whole bus is going to break down and fall apart.
Right. We become a hero complex.
Yes.
And because we're so busy, we can't see the wood for the trees. And so that's kind of the second piece, which is we start to make poor choices on how we spend our time, because we're always in it. So we never get those moments to make the right choices.
Yes.
And I'll tell you a story about a lesson I learned, which we ended up implementing into our program, which was actually the power of daydreaming. And it turns out in your brain, you have 2 different networks. It's kind of like having 2 different television networks, and you can only watch one network. So it's not like picture-in-picture TV where we have multiple screens on. You can either watch this channel or you can watch this channel. And if you're watching one channel, you can't watch the other channel, because it kind of switches it over. Yep. And in our brains, we have exactly the same thing. So it's called the task processing network, which is your busy GM, senior leader, solving problems, running the department head.
Yep.
And then you've got the
prefrontal cortex right there. Yep.
Prefrontal cortex loading, heavy sugar commitment, energy commitment, and has a lot of waste products and byproducts. The other network, which is the one that we don't tap into, is what's called the default mode network. And that's the one where, I'll ask you a question, when you're just lying in bed and suddenly you wake up at 3 a.m. and you've had that bright idea. Have you ever had that happen to you? Yep. Sure. Or you're standing in the shower and you solve that thing you've been wrangling with for a while. Yeah. Yes. For me, it's running or scuba diving. When I'm scuba diving, the world kind of sorts itself out.
Yes.
And what we see in leaders, and I struggle with this as well, is I never had time to go into my default mode network, because I was always in the task processing network. And as I say, you can only watch one or the other. Yep. So if you're always in your TPN, your brain never gets to sort things out. And because of that, you're always dealing with the waste products of high cognitive loading, which is, say, burn sugar and biological waste products that essentially breakdown of proteins and sugars in your mind, which is why you get that sort of fuzzy headness, which is then we control with caffeine and wine and painkillers and whatever it might be.
Yeah.
We never give ourselves the opportunity to make good decisions or choose, should I even be getting invested in this? Should I even respond to this email right now?
Yes.
So that's kind of the second piece. And so we implemented this in the program. We say to leaders in the first workshop, leave your phones on your desk. Don't talk to each other. Just go and look out the window for 10 minutes. And when you come back, we'll talk about what happened. And some of them come back and were like, oh my God, that was amazing. I've never done that before. And suddenly things became clearer. And we actually took it a level further with a very large American business. And we said to them, take 45 minutes, minimum 30, but ideally 45 minutes. Just take a notebook, go sit in a cafe, go off site, be somewhere else, leave your laptop and your phone behind, and just sit and see what happens. And over the course of 12 months on a leadership program, the divergence in talent and capability perception of those who didn't versus those who did was statistically very significant. So between 12 and 15% improved performance by taking 30 to 45 minutes a week with a notebook to go daydream. Like, who'd have thought? But it makes a massive difference. So this is one of the recovery mechanisms in downtime.
Yeah. Can Jimmy, like, tell us about your recovery, and we'll talk, then we'll take a break, and I want to hear about the company and, the tools, not the company per se, but the tools that you all use. And because you have, part of the reason I wanted this conversation is you have the real life experience and the passion, which drives the passion behind what you do now. How did you walk yourself out of recovery or into recovery and into the life that you have now?
Yeah, great question. Initially, because I was, I think, so deep into it, I had to just take some time out. So I took about 6 weeks off completely from work and from living, just literally slept 16 hours a day. I had to put enough reserves battery back into the energy bank account. I was heavily overdrawn. Had to put some reserves back into the energy bank account to be able to function normally. Then what I did was I started trying to understand, and I'm naturally quite a curious person, but I was like, well, how did I get myself into this? Like, how did I create this hot mess for myself? Because we have to accept responsibility that we're at least 50% to blame if we burn out, because we have made some of the choices that got us there. We chose to stay working for that company. We chose to stay working for that boss. We chose to make those decisions and act in those certain ways. So I was like, well, if I replay the slippery slope to this point, what were some of the key moments? I then started to look externally. So what was going on in my environment that was causing some of these decisions and actions and behaviors to start manifesting themselves? And could I patternize? I always look for patterns. So I was like, were there any patterns here that I could spot? And over time, for me, because I could get inquisitive and curious about it, the burnout started to fade into the background, and it became more about, how do I resolve this, and how can I understand it more? How can I get deeper immersed into the science of it? And once you have knowledge, you start to perceive things in a different way. It's like when you go to school. Once you've learned something at school, it's impossible to unlearn it, because your perspective on life has changed. So for me, getting myself out of burnout, it was understanding the science behind it, understanding the neuroscience behind it, understanding the emotional loading behind it, understanding the business environment, and putting all of those pieces together, and then starting to talk to people about it. So admitting I'd burned out to people, which was it was a scary thing to do. Jimmy, the superhuman GM who was 10 years younger than anybody else on the senior leadership team, who'd flown through his career, he was the guy that burned out. He was the guy that had to quit his job. He was the guy that had lost a marriage due to overworking. And so it was embarrassing to talk about it. But actually, when I started talking to people about some of the things I was suffering with or had experienced, they were like, oh my God, me too, And I was like, oh, okay, tell me more, and got curious about that.
Yeah.
And over probably the next couple of years, as I was working my way back and forming the organization that I'm now privileged to be the leader of, it was seeing the patterns again and again and again, and gaining, I guess, this fire inside me. And I went from sort of burned out to on fire, because I was like, well, if this is happening to me and it's happening to everybody I'm speaking to, surely I've got an obligation to do something about it. And if I go right back to the start of my career, the reason I joined the military was to do something about, the peace and the safety of my country, and to protect the people who live in it and their freedom. And so this needing to make a difference has always been in me. And so it's almost like the fire was relit. And I'll go back one more step as well. The reason I went into the corporate world and I pushed so hard to be, senior and promoted and gain career acceleration was this need to make a difference. And I thought, if I'm the CEO, I can make a difference.
Yes.
And then I realized I couldn't. And that again took the wind out of my sails. So I ended up burned out because I was like, well, everything I'm doing is pointless.
Yeah. So real quick question. We'll take a break, come back. Let's talk about all the other good things that have happened since. How did you know when you were recovered?
I think when you feel a fire back inside you, I use the analogy of flames and water and elements quite a lot in the practice that I run. And I think when you wake up in the morning, like, right, now I've got to go and do some good in the world and I'm ready for it, versus, oh my God, I don't know if I can do today, or even today I could take it or leave it. You're like, well, okay, I'm ready for today. Bring it. Yeah. When you can feel the fire again, then I think you're back. If you're still in the ambiguous zone of could do, there's a little bit more work to do. If you're in the I don't even know what I'm doing right now, then you're probably at the start of the journey. Yeah. Probably the good news story though is there is a way back, and there is a methodology to follow to get yourself back. It's just requires the work.
Yes. Ooh, I love it. A different kind of work. For sure.
Yeah, and it's not to sound scary, because probably if you are burned out, the last thing you want to hear is, oh my God, more work. What? No, I can't.
Yes.
But it's actually about doing, as we talked about just before we started, the do less to achieve more. And the whole premise of everything we do is called ways of working, not more working. It's just changing the way you work.
Yes. All right. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back.
All right.
All right, well, we take a quick break from this amazing conversation today. I want to share with you a new tool that I have for you. I think that there's a myth in our workplaces. Well, let me say this. I know there's a myth in our workplaces that meetings have to suck, and I don't believe that whatsoever. By all accounts, our time in meetings have doubled, if not more, since the start of the pandemic. And this time with your colleagues should not be a waste of time. It should be the most valuable. So if you're looking for more resources to lead meetings that are productive, powerful, impactful, and have everyone participating, get over to my website at stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings and get some new tools so that when you leave a meeting with your colleagues, you're not left going, what the actual F was that? You're going, yes, we're going to take on the world together. Let's get this done, because it was an unbelievably powerful meeting. Those tools are out there for you, my friends, and they're on my website today, stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings. Now, let's get back into that conversation. All right. So, Jimmy, we were talking and getting ready for this episode, and you educated me on what burnout truly is. And certainly in pop culture and all over LinkedIn, burnout is one of the big words used frequently. Educate us on the variations of gray before you get to burnout, so that we know and people can help identify, oh, maybe that's where I'm at. I may not just be burnout. I might be something else, because that requires different tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. The hashtag burnout thing is almost a label. And it used to be a badge of honor to say to somebody, I'm super busy. And then it was like, oh, I'm so stressed out. Yes. And now it's, oh man, I'm so burned out, man. And I think it is a really good question to try and clarify, what is burnout in comparison to being stressed out or tired out, worn out? Because each of those things individually is unpleasant. Absolutely. If you're stressed out because you've got a lack of priorities, a lack of resources, over responsibility, there's too much going on in your job, sure, that's a miserable place to be. If you're tired out or worn out, you're struggling to get up in the morning because energy levels are really low, again, that's a pretty tough place to be. And it's not just about work, right? When you're worn out, it could be your obligations as a partner, as a member of your community, as a parent, as a son or daughter, if you've got caregiver responsibilities there.
Yes.
And so that it's when all of those things start to stack up that we start to see some of the indicators of burnout. And we boiled it down to 5 factors of what does burnout actually involve. Okay. But if we simplify it and say it's when you're tired out, worn out, stressed out, overworked, and you can't see a way through it, that's when you're really starting to notice burnout. And when we go into partnerships with organizations and with the leaders in those organizations, we're looking for some of those characteristics while we do our diagnosis work versus, yeah, we just have so much work going on, or we can't prioritize.
Yes.
So that's an indicator, but it doesn't necessarily mean your business is at burnout or you and your team are at burnout.
Yes. And it seems to me that fifth part, the fifth element of you can't see a way through is the most critical. Because if you can no longer make decisions, critically think, I would say in a sense, be proactive, problem solve, your brain is literally shutting down. And that is
mush.
Yeah, mush. Yes.
And it's so fascinating to me because it's where we start the book, and where we start all of our engagements is the scientific way of saying that would be purpose.
Yes.
And so we talk a lot about working on purpose. Now, what does that mean? It means working toward a purpose, but also being deliberate about what you do, making choices about what you do. And, I won't go into it in great detail, but we have 4 layers of purpose that we partner with on an organization. And the first one is, what's your purpose? Why were you put on this planet? And for nearly all of us, it comes down to some sense of making a difference, whether it's driven by a childhood trauma and you say, well, when I grow up, I'm going to fix that, or whether it was made through a great example as a child. And we tend to, these formative experiences tend to be sort of 7 to 11 years old, but it tends to be either one or the other or both that go, well, why were you put on this planet? But you know what? More than 80% of leaders that we partner with have no idea why they were put on this planet. No idea. What's your contribution? What's your why? And what's the fire that gets you up in the morning? Well, I haven't spent time thinking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how do you push through when stuff is getting really tough? How do you align your energy based on why you're on the planet? They don't know. So we start there. We then lift it up a layer to what's the purpose of your role? And for most people, the purpose of their role is that little paragraph on the top of their job description that was written in a hurry by a manager who was trying to do a restructure, who didn't give it a lot of thought. And I'm being flippant, but you know what I mean?
No, you're so right. You are so right. Yes.
And we build our entire identity around this. Like, I am the account manager for this, and the purpose of my role is some business jargon.
Yes.
And so you ask people, what's the purpose of your role? Why does your role exist? And they're like, oh, okay, that's a curly question as well. And then we say, so how does your personal purpose line up with your role purpose? How did you end up in this career? And can you hook onto it? And it can, and this is a great conversation for leaders to have, is how does your personal purpose, the reason you put on this planet, connect you to your role? And it could be, I'll give you a very simple example. I work with a hotel chain, and we talk to the bar people. We said, how does you're managing a bar or managing a restaurant. How does that? And they said, well, I grew up and we never went to a restaurant or a bar. I never got to go out as a kid because we were really poor. So I am driven to try and create these amazing personal experiences. That's why I was put on this planet. And so my job allows me to do that.
Yes.
So they hooked in, and that makes it's almost like the 3 bricklayers, or the sweep, the janitor at NASA story, where they're like, oh, I'm helping put a man on the moon by sweeping the floors. Fantastic.
Yes.
So we've got our individual purpose, and then we've got our role purpose. Next layer up is, what's the purpose of this team? And again, for burnout, we see teams that are, the analogy we use is, if I ask you to close your eyes and point to north in a room full of leaders, you'll have people pointing like this all over the place. But everybody thinks they know where north is. Well, everybody thinks they know what the team purpose is.
Yes.
And generally, when we all write it down, there'll be some similarities. But if we're 1 degree off over the course of a year, by the time we get to the end of the year, that 1 degree has kind of diverged over time. And those 1 degrees are, what's the priorities? What are we working towards? What are we going to switch off when things get hard? How are we allocating our resources? Where are things going to go that make a massive difference? So immediately you can see, well, if I'm suddenly the one who's rowing the boat this way and everybody else is rowing the boat that way, I'm having to row extra hard because they're all pulling me.
Yes.
And so we start to see burnout happen. So again, the purpose. And then the final one is the organization. What's the purpose of our organization? And particularly what we're seeing for, obviously we've got a lot of senior leaders who listen. For the younger generations now, having an organization with a really clarified purpose that's meaningful that they can get on board with their personal purpose, their role purpose, the purpose of their team is contributing to that, for what the organization is trying to achieve, is critical for them to manage their energy levels and stress levels. Otherwise they go, I don't see the point in what I'm doing. There's no point. There's no why. We're not doing anything that's worth it. We're just making widgets or sticking things out into the market. And I don't really care about that. So I'm going to go somewhere else that has got a purpose. Yes.
Makes complete sense. A couple more questions, and I want to allow you to get back to making a difference in your part of the world here. And I mean, you're in good company, sir. Like, I've known since I was 5 years old that I was here to change the world. And it took me to my early 30s to be able to define what that is. And I'm grateful that every day I get to live my purpose. And it'll have different roles over the years, right? But this is, and that's what we're doing here at the Change Architects, is we are bringing more of that purpose to folks that are high achievers that have been told they're too much, you're trying to do too much, you're too ambitious, you're too whatever, fill in the blank. You are one of those, and you experience burnout and now are leveraging that experience to serve others. This is all we talk about over here. So I love meeting another too much person, because the world needs more too much.
I think you're so right. And to just add to that, I think one of the things that people can get themselves into a bit of a pickle with is that we all want to make a difference in some way.
Yes.
It's when maybe your natural energy level or your ability or your drive is misaligned with your actual capability to make a difference. Yes. And so one of the things I always say to leaders is, well, do you need to be the CEO of this organization? Is that how you're going to make a difference? Or can you make a difference at tier 3 or tier 2 versus being at tier 1? So, and the same for us as consultants, do I need to be in, a world famous New York Times best-selling author who's also a movie star, who's also, doing this, or am I happy just doing the thing I do? And for me, it's around really measuring my energy levels, because when I say yes to work, I'm also saying no to some other stuff.
Always.
So balance is key, right? So the burnout management comes from, I want to work really hard. I want to do a great job, but I also have some other responsibilities in my life I've got to measure up against. And so not just measuring my own success by the size of my bank account or the promotions I'm getting.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's why it's intentional for me to say save part of the world, because I think too much people get caught up in saving the world.
All of the world.
Yes. And that's not our job at all. Save your part of the world, right?
And you know what? If you're rushing around saving the whole world, then chances are you're probably not saving the parts of the world that really need you, because you're spread too thin.
Yes.
And this is one of the things I noticed in my own recovery, was when I slowed down, I actually sped up, because I wasn't rushing around like a Tasmanian devil trying to keep all the plates spinning. I was like, okay, for this next 3 months, I'm just going to go hard on this one thing. Then I saw other opportunities and things were more crystallized around me. And so I actually had my business grew far faster as a result of slowing down than head down, bum up.
Yes. Head down, bum up. I like that. You made a very bold choice, the Jimmy of 2017, that said, I have to resign. And then I know you had many other hard choices that came after that. What do you wish that Jimmy knew then that you know now, and all of the Jimmys in 2023 that are on the precipice of making those bold decisions for their life as well?
Oh, wow. That's a big responsibility, that question. Probably two things. Number one is the phenomenon known as the spotlight effect. So when you are this high performing, high drive, high performance anxiety, maybe imposter syndrome, driven leader who's got to deliver and has to be everywhere all the time, all at once, it's because often we think somebody might see us not being at our best, or somebody might perceive that we have a weakness or a chink in our armor. So we have to always be everywhere all at once. And we think that everybody's watching us all the time. And the truth of the matter, as we've all discovered, when you stand and look at it rationally, is everybody's worrying exactly the same things about themselves. So people are so preoccupied with, is everybody watching me, that they're too busy to be watching you. So when we give ourselves that little bit of grace and say, today, I'm just going to bring 85% or 80%, and that'll still be great because you're awesome, then the reality is that's enough. And so that I wish I'd given myself that advice, and I wish I'd taken that advice earlier on in my career to to actually do that go slow to go fast, because you're sustainable at 80%. You're not sustainable at 110% all the time. And you just get tired out and you start to make mistakes and things start to go wrong for you. So if you're heading down that track, just slow down a little bit, let go of some stuff. Don't overcommit yourself and just take your foot off the gas. Make some choices on what you can let go of, what you can delegate, what you can just stop. And you'd be again, probably just quickly to dip back to purpose. When we ask people, what's the purpose of all the things you do in your job? It tends to fall into 3 categories. I don't know. We just do it. I was given it and told it was important, but I'm still not really sure. And I clearly understand the purpose of this. And for those of you who are going, what can I slow down and stop? Go to the things that you've no idea why you even do them. You just do them because you were told to. And there's a little bit of an opportunity zone.
Yes.
The other piece of advice I think I would say is, if you're in that space, it can be really hard to see the way out. You're kind of in a forest full of trees and you can't see anywhere else. And so my advice would be to get some support from a coach, a mentor, a book, a podcast, but just try and take some time off to fill your mind with some other things other than work.
Yes.
And if you can't find time to do that, then maybe it's time to reach out for some support. My job is to keep you working, keep you paying your mortgage, keep you feeding your family, and talk you off the ledge. And there are plenty of people like that who are out there who are available to you at whatever price point you're looking to pay.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. One of my tips when folks are kind of in that either in burnout stage or approaching it, and you can tell from others, is just work your 8 hours. Just work your 8 hours and go home. You just have to force yourself to stop sometimes. As a high achiever, I sometimes just make myself lay down on the floor and stare at the ceiling. 10 minutes, just to disconnect.
Minutes.
Yeah, just disconnect.
Yeah. Solving burnout is not like a massive, we're going to change everything all at once.
No.
We say something very similar. We say, hey, why don't you just close your laptop at 5 once a week? Go home, recharge the batteries.
Yep.
Why don't you just leave the laptop at work this weekend?
Yep.
And just recharge your batteries. If you work at home, which for many of us is a reality as well, just switch off. Just go out for a walk, or book yourself a coffee appointment, or go to a gym class at 5 p.m. So you have an obligation to leave. It's that one small thing that is what talks you off the ledge, and that's the key point. Is when you're burned out, it's just that one small thing that makes a difference.
Yes, that's exactly right. For those of us who aren't burnout but have colleagues that we see are in a bad spot, what do you suggest we do for them, or say to them, or a way to be present for them? It's not all about the doing, but how can we support those colleagues that are in bad spots?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I get asked quite frequently. There's 2 pieces of it. First of all, they'll probably be in the wood for the trees syndrome, and if they're genuinely burned out, they won't have the mental acuity to go through a coaching conversation with you about how can we change this and what would you like to fix. So initially, it's about just quietly starting to relieve the pressure on them, encouraging them to start doing a bit more self-care. If they need employee assistance, maybe steering them in the direction of a bit of employee assistance for a friendly chat. You have to be quite sensitive to people who are literally, it could go either way, right? They could break or they could come back. And
yes,
your job as a leader is to try and just bring them back. And so that's take a little bit of heat away that is causing them to really spiral out of control. Obviously, I recommend picking up a copy of my book, because it's built by somebody who has gone through it. And it's that you need to be, as a leader, you really need to understand what's causing the burnout for them. It could be a dying parent is just that straw that's breaking the camel's back for them, and they just need a bit of compassionate time.
Yep.
It could equally be they're completely isolated and siloed in the organization, so start helping them network. It could be they haven't taken a day off in 2 years, so you need to be able to diagnose. And so the book helps you understand each of the 5 elements around purpose, abundance, connection, exploration, and downtime, and then gives you some tips for how you can start to make it from bad to good. And so you need to understand what's happening for them before you try and solution for you.
Yes. Fabulous. And what's the name of your book?
It's Beat Burnout, Ignite Performance, the Leader's Playbook for Building a High Performance Culture.
All right. We'll have the link in the show notes because you got to get your hands on that. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for this conversation, bringing your passion to the world, bringing your passion to my people. I hope they'll become your people too. Like, this is good stuff.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So when Jimmy starts his story with, I learned early on in my career that excellent is just average, I could totally relate. I have been a classic overachiever my entire life, and we work with a lot of overachievers. And I love to invite people into high achieving land because overachieving has a level of bad stress, striving, kind of perfectionism, a lot of things that do not serve us in the long term and certainly are not sustainable. Instead, I invite folks into high achieving. And this is where we get to keep our high expectations. We get to still be too much for the world, too ambitious, want to do too much, but we also allow ourselves to take a nap and get our 8 hours of sleep and prioritize our physical health and prioritize our relationships with our loved ones, because all of those elements make us whole as a human, not just striving and working and working and working. So I invite you to think about, where are you trying to overachieve and where can you high achieve in your life? There is a very big difference between those two. And then when Jimmy named, how to know if you might have burnout issues in your culture, you've got an executive team in disarray. There's no purpose. People don't know why you're working on what. And you're spending your days doing whack-a-mole or putting fires out. I don't know a leadership team that doesn't feel like they're putting fires out every single day. That's a place that leads us to burnout as leaders. And we need to get to a much more purposeful place. And those layers of purpose, we need individuals to know their purpose. We need the role to have a purpose. We need teams to have a purpose, and we need organizations to have a purpose. I just love that insight to what Jimmy brought to us around purpose and how it can be the antidote to burnout. All right, my friend, if you got value out of this, please share this with another overachiever or high achiever in your life so they can learn too. And let's get off of this media here and get back to saving our part of the world. And I'll see you soon, my friend.